And I know we've had a lot of evaluations with Shador Sanders and so much more. So to talk about the red hot scorching Chicago Bears, because they got an important date once again with the Green Bay Packers. Steve Edwards joins us here on the program. Well, y'all got a good one this up and coming week, man, with Green Bay on the score. Like there's a score to be settled here, but I do want to say this. I have loved with the entire culture shift that the Chicago Bears and what Ben Johnson has been able to do. Now, again, I think this season has been interesting because just earlier on, I had David Pindell talking about quarterbacking, and I love that I shift from quarterback to the O-line. Because that's the one thing is you got to protect your quarterback at all costs. And then, of course, your offense as a whole. So when you think about this, Ben Johnson came in with the plan that we need to change this culture. And the way we're going to do it, we got to beef up the O-line. We got to get a dual running back set that is ferocious to run the football. You got to pin your ears back and get ready to start playing some physical football. Then it's get the takeaways and get the rushes, get the sacks. When you think about this culture shift, Steve, this has to make every Chicagoan out there just loving it and for the ride. Like what has this feeling has been? Because it's been a long time coming for a lot of Bears fans.
Yeah, I think when you think about this culture change, we've seen those moments, when Nagy came in 2018, you'll get that magical year. You go back to some of, the most consistent years were back in Lovey during my time where you saw some consistency, but it's always these one-offs, with the Chicago Bears and then we'll go into a rut of just mediocrity. And this, even though we haven't seen more, this is the first year, it just feels different because it's sustainable, because it's a culture and it's a offensive guy and it's a developer, not only just, what he does offensively and scheming guys up, the development he's doing with Caleb Williams, and he's got him heading in the right direction. But it's just the attitude he brings with it, the whole team, they're believing, because we're deficient. We're not a complete team. We don't have a really good pass rush, but he has this team believing each and every week that we can win. And the fan base, I think, it's taking the fan base because we've been burnt so much. I think it's taking them a little, they're enjoying the ride, but it's like, is this for real? But I think each and every week we go through this, it's for real. And I think even though it was Cleveland Browns and we should have beat them like we did in the past, that would be a game that would maybe we'll squeak out or we would lose. And we came out there and handled business. And it was just another proving point that this team is different and we're heading in a different direction. And it is actually absolutely on fire here in Chicago.
I think about this because, talking about offensive line plays, we'll get into a couple of games up from in here and how important that it is. And especially from your experience and perspective itself. I mean, coming into this, they signed Joe Thuney, they get Jonah Jackson, and then they get Drew Dahlman from Atlanta. And then all of a sudden, they are the most pass protective offensive line in the league. And then on top of all of that, Caleb has been getting the ball. He's been getting rid of the ball a lot quicker than what we saw last year. And then the other thing is he's been the least sacked quarterback in the league, which is crazy because you would think that you're coming against defensive fronts, even for a lot of, division rivals in the division in the NFC North. But for that, I feel like there's a chemistry in there from quarterback and offensive line, and even with the coach, that there's a belief in there. I think Caleb also trusts he's got a great blanket that when you have that, Caleb's going to do wondrous things. Like, is that the biggest benefactor that can happen as an offense? That's a man's best friend from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that O-line took a little bit of time to gel. Early on, it was some difficulties, learning Caleb and his escapability, where he's going to be. But this group has molded into one of the better offensive line groups. And then you throw Ozzie Trapillo, who was thrown in there because Theo Benedict got hurt and he stepped in, and that's your second round draft pick, who a lot of people wrote off because it didn't look good in training camp. And he kept working it, and you throw him in there. Now he possibly might be a left tackle of the future, and that's something you might not have to worry about in upcoming draft, that you got maybe your left tackle of the future. And then you just couple that with Caleb's, them solidifying and being a good pass pro team, with Caleb's escapability. Some of the things he's escaping is masterful. And as the offensive lineman, you're going to give up pressure. This is the NFL. Everybody's good. So when you get beat, you just like, my guy's about to make a sack. You got that gut feeling, and then here's Caleb spinning out, getting away, scrambling. So that combination with a good pass pro team, with a quarterback has the escapabilities of Caleb, it makes for big moments, big plays. And one thing that Caleb's been a little inconsistent is when he does escape, when he should run or when he should throw the ball, and he's been late, and some of the receivers have a little troubles with with the scramble drill. But all that's starting to come together in the last couple, 2 or 3 games. And when that starts really getting there, this is a really dangerous team, and it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, it is. And, it's interesting because we think about, the growth of Caleb Williams. Like initially, it didn't look as pretty. And I think initially what that is because Ben Johnson and Caleb, they're trying to build up that healthy relationship.
Yes.
In my opinion, I think, Caleb is so wildly talented. Like, he's got a great fastball. The question is, can he control the fastball with a little bit of some of those simple dinks and dunks here and there, get some consistency, and stick to the on-script stuff? So I feel like because of progress by progressions, I think that's the part in which you're starting to see the best version of Caleb. And I started the year where I thought the jumps were going to be J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix for respective reasons, but I have loved the growth out of Caleb Williams. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I know some people look at that passing percentage, and I'm one to kind of look past that. I'm looking at, obviously being a former player and being an offensive lineman. When I watch a game, I'm watching it right up the middle, and looking at the very nuances of what a quarterback brings. And Caleb, and it started maybe about 5-6 weeks ago. But at the beginning of the season, we couldn't do good at the pre-snaps. Penalties were killing us, and it's a little bit of that still around, but that stuff started getting cleaned up. I think that was Caleb getting in and out of the huddle, getting the verbiage out of there, inside the huddle, and getting up to the line of scrimmage. And then one thing was key, and I mentioned on my show, was that Caleb started moving receivers around. It's that thing where you'll see a Tom Brady be like, hey, what are you doing over here? Where you lined up wrong? Get over here. And I started seeing that, and I was like, okay, this guy started to understand what's going on. I think that, he's gonna be like that throw he made yesterday to DJ Moore. Total, like, I mean, everybody's like, no, touchdown, because he has that ability. But I know one thing about Caleb, he goes for the big game hunting, and that's one thing we want him to. We love that ability, and we saw that with the DJ Moore touchdown, but we also want him to take the easy checkdowns and the easy throws. But I think you're starting to see him take those as he goes. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, but also that's his superpower too. So how do you manage that? And I think that's what Ben Johnson's job and those offensive coaches' job is. And I think they're doing a really good job, because you're starting to see it really mesh together. And I know I don't want to jump into off season, but once he gets to that off season, there's going to be a mega jump. I just want this team to keep winning, get to the playoffs, because that experience is invaluable, to get that experience as a team and for a young quarterback. And then we can continue to build him, who I think, people say he's going to be a good quarterback. I think he's on his way to being a really elite quarterback in this system. I think the sky's the limit when it comes to Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams relationship, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a start of a journey, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I
Right.
think the way that this whole NFC North has shifted, it's going to be competitive for the next few years, and I'm all about it. So I started it off on the show where I talked about Kansas City. It's horrible. I mean, Patrick Mahomes out for the season with a torn ACL. This offensive line is banged up. And to me personally, look, I know it's got to be depressing in Kansas City, but don't bury your head in the sand and think it's just over. And I mean, 9 years of dominance. You won the divisions. You've won Super Bowls. You've gone to so many championships over the years. And I think a lot of it is, and I said this respectfully, is I think Kansas City was spoiled with Patrick Mahomes because we know what he is. And on top of that, it kind of took your eye off of the run game needs to be adjusted. The offensive line, after they lost Joe Thuney to Chicago, like they needed to reshape this thing, and they had to put a lot of faith and trust in a rookie. So for Kansas City, I feel like all is not lost with them. I think all it is that it's a little crumble, but that doesn't mean they're going to be down and on the ground for very long. When you think about Kansas City, like, is this more of reboot or rebuild for Kansas City? Because I feel like you got to make some moves. Guys got to be honest with some of these guys getting up in age. And then eventually, because you got to think that's really impressive for a GM to draft at the very bottom and yet still be that relevant. That's difficult for anybody. So what do you think? I think it might be rebuild mode, respectfully, only just because the competition in itself is getting tougher by the minute.
Yeah, that's going to be a really big offseason for Kansas City, right? They got their salary cap issues. So it's going to be one of those things. Could it be a little bit of both? Could it be what does that look like? What is a little bit of both? I think you try to start sustaining some of that. Like, we'll have to take a look. Are you going to get a retirement from a Travis Kelce? That's yet to remain seen. Or is this a year where, okay, we're not making the playoffs, we start shutting, because when you go to so many championships, so many Super Bowls, so many AFC championship games, those are deep seasons, those are deep runs. Maybe you start looking like, hey, this might be a blessing in disguise where we can get some rest. We can get somebody, not too many of those guys have a lot of years left, but maybe you muster out another year because you have a really good restful off season, and maybe you start shutting some of these guys down with the last few games to allow them to kind of start, get a jump start on that all-season recovery, get ready for next year. Obviously, the big thing is going to be, with a late season ACL injury, what does that look like? I know nowadays in sports medicine, guys jump back very quickly. So,
That's right.
You could see Mahomes easily ready for the first game. And his work ethic is unbelievable, and he has the money and the work ethic. So, but it's going to be something they're going to have to look at. That salary cap. Obviously, they're going to have to rebuild that offensive line. Just a little, one thing I've learned. One of my roommates from college. Right now, he's he's an agent, and his client is Damian Pierce, who's on their practice squad. I don't know if he got elevated or not, but one thing he did mention and was like, all those running backs, from what his perspective is and why Damian Pierce chose to go there and sign with him when he had a lot of suitors, they were told like they're going to let a lot of those guys go.
Yep.
I'm under assumption, my buddy's under assumption that a lot of those running backs are not getting signed. So you may see a total rebuild like you were talking about, where they let a lot of guys go and try to rebuild this thing and be creative with, trades and building up, getting some draft capital. It will be interesting because that Kansas City team, you can't count them out of what they're going to possibly do. They're a smart organization. They've been doing it for years. They kept things successful, even with a high salary of Patrick Mahomes. I think they're not done yet. And I think you can see Kansas City do some interesting things in this offseason to get right back in the mix of things.
So the up and coming matchup. So Green Bay is obviously coming off of a loss to Denver, and Look, I saw in the beginning, um, is they kind of poked the bear a little bit, and with the whole Rashawn Gary and the tripping stuff, they kind of poked the bear a bit. But to me, Green Bay without Micah Parsons is going to be tough to instill pressures because Rashawn Gary and Quay Walker and a couple of they're going to have to step themselves up, and we know that the secondary might be a little bit challenging. But what I've noticed is, and especially with this matchup and what Chicago, I mean, that was a great game the first time around, and I'm excited about the second time. But I think with Green Bay, it's going to be a lot tougher because now it feels like Caleb will have a little more of a cleaner pocket. He won't have much of that Micah Parsons hurrying pass rush type of deal to where he could just be comfortable in it. What do you see with this with Green Bay? Because I know that's got to be tough for them. And look, Jordan Love, I've noticed that once he throws a pick and what he does is he has the ability to overcome that adversity. So I feel like this second round might be pretty challenging, but yet more exciting than what the first gave us.
Yeah, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but this is not crazy. The impact that Micah Parsons had in that first game, even though he had 0 sacks, was more impactful than what Myles Garrett did yesterday with a sack and a half.
That's right.
And when I'm going to tell you, because Michael Parsons was moving all around that line against the Bears in the first half. Now, the Bears did a great job neutralizing them through game plan, through scheme, and running the ball. But in that first half, Michael Parsons was lining up all over the place, and he was just freeing up guys, and he was just getting penetration. One in particular where Caleb took a really big hit in that first half of that game was Michael Parsons stand-up 3 technique over Jonah Jackson. He comes down, and he was lining up on Jonah Jackson and giving him a lot of problems, just in general on just a normal pass rush. But on this play, he came down and he picked Darnell Wright, which allowed their DN, I believe it was number 55, to loop in. Caleb steps in the pocket and gets a really big hit for a sack. And he was just doing all those things, like where is he lined up? He's over here, he's over there. And he had 0 sacks, but he had an impact on the rest of that group that allowed them to play free. He's just one of those type of players. When you think about guys, I play with Urlacher, their presence and what they can bring, this elevates everybody else. Myles Garrett has that same effect, but it's just, the way the Bears handled him, even though he had a sack and a half, he was, where he was going to line up at, and that made it easy. He's wide 9 and run away from him, send blockers this way. Micah Parsons does so much for that Green Bay team. And I almost take it as almost like his impact was kind of when the Bears signed Khalil Mack in 2018, That immediate impact and how he just took that defense and they raised their game up and they had that really terrific season. So that's going to really hurt that team. But a lot of guys are going to have to step up, which is a really good team speed that they possess is on that Green Bay defense. But that Michael Parsons injury definitely hurts them big time. But great for the Chicago Bears when you think about trying to scheme up and, not have to worry about where he's at.
Yeah, and, it's interesting because I feel like this league has taken quite a shift. I feel like when we talk about playoff teams and when we talk about potential Super Bowl winner, I almost feel that it's going to be a team in the NFC. I just don't know who. Yeah. We know the Rams played well. Who knows with as far as their star receivers, that's going to be a question mark. Seattle definitely plays in the trenches, tough and gritty. And you look at the AFC, it's a complete shift. We may end up seeing a playoff without potentially Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes. You're going to have Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert. Like, is this, I feel like we've seen this before in past history, but how exciting does this gotta be though? Because I feel like for a football fan in general, like myself, watching and evaluating this, you got to be pumped and amped. Whereas for team fans, it might feel a little different. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, if you think about that, like, I just think it's going to be an interesting playoff by the time it starts.
This might be gearing up for one of the most exciting postseasons. I mean, we're already feeling it, right? All the playoff scenarios. One of my buddies was just panicking last week when Green Bay, Bears lost to Green Bay and the Bears jumped down to 7. And I'm like, dude, be okay. It's okay. Because the parity, and the one thing I said, the parity in NFL is crazy this year. I said this several weeks ago. So when the Bears win and Green Bay loses, and here comes the Bears jumping up to second, and that's going to be the case in the next 3 weeks, that everything's going to be jumping all over the place. And then when you get to the playoffs, I think it's so much parity. You're used to Kansas City just being there at the top of the helm. And you got Philadelphia, the defending champs. It looks like they're going to get in. They may, we'll see how they finish up the last three weeks. But, at one point you were counting out Buffalo. They looked like they were done for. And then here they come. Here comes Josh Allen and his heroics. You got New England. They needed to come. Maybe they needed to come back down to earth with a loss. Denver, sneakingly, everybody says this is not real. Kind of similar to the Bears in the sense where this is not real. They're not beating anybody, but here they go. They continue to win, and they took down a really good Green Bay team. So you have to take them for real. So, and it's all without some superstars of Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, and without Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be crazy. And I always say, if the Bears, we have some work to do. I think we need to get that 11th win, as far as securing our playoff spot. It's always nice to see the Chicago Bears in the mix. It's just one of those. It's one of those teams that when they're in, you feel good. But like, it's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be in, and it's just going to be that year. It's like, who's going to take it? It's going to be somebody fresh, perhaps, because you still got Philadelphia that will be in there. But it's gearing up for what might be one of the most exciting. I mean, this last weekend was crazy. It's going to gear up to be one of the most exciting 3 weeks that's just going to head. I mean, we're in playoff football mode right now for a lot of teams.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, I think, with the way that the AFC is, I feel like it's wide open, but there are many surprises. I feel like Jacksonville and Houston, nobody's talked so much about them. Oh, yeah, they've played such good football, but should be interesting. By the way, Monday Night Football game tonight, who are we talking, Dolphins or Steelers? Because I feel like Dolphins, since they fired Chris Greer, they've been on a completely different level, but I still feel like they definitely are just one, if not a couple pieces there to where that'll get them back into shape.
Yeah. I mean, like, what was it? So, several weeks ago, you were looking at Mike McDaniels on his way out, and the way they have played disrespectfully, you think it might, are they going to stick with Mike McDaniels and keep this thing going and answer some piece, add some pieces there to get this thing going. And sometimes, the grass is not always green on the other side. Maybe Mike McDaniels has some learning and some maturing to do as a play caller, as a coach, that you stick with a guy like that, and especially when he's showing it and got this team playing better. Pittsburgh is that tricky team right now. You just don't know what you're going to get week to week from them. And where is it at tonight?
It's in Pittsburgh tonight.
Ooh, weather. Weather. I mean, that would probably push me towards the Steelers because of the weather, and some of the adversity and the talking that's going behind the scenes. And Mike Tomlin's name is always, and I mean, he's just a great coach that takes advantage of just the news clippings and Aaron Rodgers. So I feel this is going to be a really good game. It's going to be closer than what I expect, but I think the weather could be the tipping edge that would have me edging out. And what's the spread on that one?
I think this one, the spread right now is on Pittsburgh -3.
Ooh.
So, and of course, the over/under, it's 42.5. So I feel like it could be pretty gritty at the end.
Yes, I think it's just I just don't see a high scoring one. You know what I mean? I think it's
Neither
going to
do I.
be
Yeah.
that. And if you're Pittsburgh, I'm running the ball, and please give it to Warren because he's on my fantasy team. So even though I got my game squared up, I would like to see him get going, and that make me feel good going into the playoffs. But
Yeah.
I just think Pittsburgh is one of those teams. I mean, you said Jacksonville, but it's just you know I think you get Pittsburgh in there. Aaron Rodgers, what could be his last ride, So I will
Yeah.
pull for Pittsburgh. I think they're going to do it, and I would like to see Pittsburgh get in there because then that just adds another element into the playoff picture that you got the old man Rodgers maybe going for his last hurrah.
Yeah, no, totally agree, man. This should be an interesting game, though, tonight. Appreciate you for coming on by, Steve. Happy holidays to you and your family, my friend. It's a great one. I mean, here in Denver, we've only had one snowstorm, and so far it's been sunny. It's been like 60. So, but I'll take it. But
Oh, good for you
appreciate.
guys. It's freezing here, so you obviously saw the game on Sunday. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I definitely got to have you come on my show. I do my show tonight on Monday nights, the Bear Down with Big Steve. So, definitely we'll have to collab and get you on, man.
Hey,
Appreciate you
absolutely,
having me.
man. I'd love to collaborate with all those Chicago people. I
Oh yeah, they're
absolutely, I'd
crazy.
love
Yeah,
to.
TTNL is my network I'm on, and they are crazy guys. So I think they would definitely like your personality and your insight.
Oh, I greatly appreciate it, man. Happy holidays to you, and we'll definitely see you soon.
All right, take care.
Take care. Yeah, I think, Chicago, they've